From mid to late January, the Miami Heat completely collapsed. They lost 7 straight games to the point where they were just one loss away from dropping to 500. Then January 31st hit and it's like they flipped a switch, winning 11 of their next 16 games, many against playoff teams, and this turnaround can be attributed to some truly suffocating defense. Over that time, they've held opponents to just 109 points every 100 possessions, about 6 points better than the league's average, and good for third in the league. Here's what's really interesting though. You take a look at the top defensive teams in the NBA, and there's a pretty clear trend. Minnesota has Rudy Gobert. Over the last 2 seasons, players have shot more than 9% below their expected field goal percentage with him at the rim, and that's alongside 2 other traditionally sized bigs in Karl Anthony Towns and Naz Reid. Then you have Cleveland with their double big unit of Mobley and Allen, both of which have held opponents over 7% below their expected average at the rim. Boston, same thing, Porzingis manning the middle as a traditional anchor big with immense shot blocking, holding opponents to nearly 12% below their average at the rim. Even if you look at past years, like Milwaukee with Giannis and Lopez, or the Lakers with AD, and take your pick at a center, I think you get the idea. As for Miami, their starting center is Bam Adebayo, who averages 1 block a game, and over the last 2 seasons, players have actually shot almost 1% better than their average with him at the rim. And while many of these paint-oriented fives also have another capable rim protector by their side, the Heat don't really run any sort of secondary paint defender. Actually, as a team, they've blocked just 3.4 shots a game this season, last in the NBA by a wide margin. Just to put that into some more perspective, the Heat as an entire team over 48 minutes are blocking less shots than Victor Wembanyama alone in his 29 minutes a game. When teams get to the rim, they can score on this Heat squad. So the simple solution is to, of course, implement a scheme that never lets teams get to the rim. Here's a look at every team's rim defense since January 31st in terms of both opportunities allowed and how opponents shoot when they get there. All the way on the right, you'll see some teams who have not been able to stop opponents from getting to the rim, and up at the very top you have a team like Washington that's paint is essentially room service. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you'll find Boston, who's limiting both the volume and efficiency. Then all the way on the left is where Miami shows up, about average in terms of percentage, but first by a decent margin in that nobody can get there. Priority number 1 in their scheme is protecting the middle of the floor at all costs. Just look at how they wall off Zion here. Both Jovic and Martin are showing their length and angling their bodies to take away the middle, leaving only one way to drive, right into Bam with no real opportunity to finish. This time it's Derek White who gets a handoff and turns the corner, only for Richardson to pick him up in the middle, while Bam aggressively helps at the nail to shut off any driving lane. White hesitates before trying to attack anyways, and the result is a turnover. It doesn't matter who has the ball, they're building that wall-like formation. Against ball screens, Bam will usually sit back and drop coverage, while again that strong side wing sits on the elbow to not allow any sort of dribble penetration, just completely taking away that space. On this one, you're going to see Paul George start to isolate, but with Jaquez loading up early at the nail, he decides to pull back and reset with the pick and roll going away from the middle, which draws Bam out in a high drop, and with no driving lane, it's a tougher step back 3. Bam's positioning as a drop defender is awesome, and everyone's on the same page when it comes to game plan. Notice how Martin angles his body to force the ball into Bam, then when Harden gets near the corner, that defender's gonna take a swipe, and the shot he gets is a step back midi. That dig from the corner is another one of their go-to tactics. Herter gets a handoff and starts a drive with Bam back in that drop, and by stepping over and showing that length, it makes Herter pick up his dribble early. This time it's going to be a pin down action for Kawhi to move into an open jumper, and Jimmy gets stuck on the screen, so that corner dig actually buys him some time to recover, and what would have been a practice shot ends up contested. A tactic like this pairs perfectly with how they like to take away the middle. Highsmith angles his body to force a drive wide, Hero makes that aggressive dig, and like clockwork, it's a really tough mid-range J. Now, in most cases, a lot of what they do could be considered over-helping, but it comes down to team execution. For one, Jimmy is one of the most devastating nail defenders in NBA history because he's not only aggressively playing the drive, but anticipates passing lanes as well as anyone. And another strategy they've committed to is always closing out as hard as possible. So on a play like this where Highsmith roams way off the corner to load up early, he's still able to recover and get a hand up on Tatum's three. The risk that comes with closing out so aggressively is it puts you in a more vulnerable position to get beat off the dribble, and that's when a second defender will move on a string to once again shut off the middle, while that original defender covers that now open space to mitigate any advantages. There's no team in basketball that's better at scrambling to recover from advantages. No matter what, there's just always someone to step in front of the ball. Whenever there's an open man, they'll have someone close out from one pass away to run them off the line, and it's like no matter how many times a team drives and kicks to a potential shooter, they're always in position to take away the opportunity. So much of that comes down to personnel. They've got all of these lengthy, athletic wings and forwards who can cover a ton of ground very quickly, whether that's Jimmy, Caleb Martin, Jaime Jaquez, Haywood Highsmith, Josh Richardson, and having these types of guys unlocks maybe the most defining quality of their defense, how much they like to switch. With that said, I actually think it's Bam who makes this work to the level that it does, because at the 5, he's not only capable of picking up smaller players, but is a legitimately great one-on-one defender out in space due to a really unique combination of length and mobility. So what you'll see them do as a team for the most part is just switch any sort of action that's moving towards the middle. Jimmy and Hero don't even have to communicate because they know the plan. Then when the Spurs try a second action on the opposite side, same exact thing between Hero and Martin, and the paint is essentially off limits as someone is always there. That's also why they're comfortable playing these weaker defensive links like a Hero or a Duncan Robinson and putting them on the ball, because even if they do get beat, they're running into some more of that aggressive help at the nail. The risk that comes with switching, especially with Bam, is that they really lack size. So when Bam's on a guard and a big posts up one of their wings, you'll see another strategy bringing the weak side guy over early. And this really applies to any sort of attack near the baseline. Fultz drives, Robinson drops from the corner, and Bam slides in between both potential shooters to prepare for a closeout. This sort of shifting defense is another way for them to mitigate advantages that the offense creates. You don't want to leave Kawhi on a guard in single coverage, so Martin comes over to double, and watch the rest of the defense rotate one pass over. Harden tries to create off the catch, then kicks it to PG, and they end up with a contested 3. Here's another example. Bam doubles Sabonis in the post, then the 3 weak side defenders all shift one pass over, and by the time the ball gets swung, there isn't even an advantage to attack anymore. Again, a lot of this comes down to personnel, not just the athletic wings to close out quickly, a center who can step out to the perimeter when needed, and not only run a wing off the line, but stick with him on a drive and force him into a tough shot. The way they so seamlessly rotate and shift their position to eat up space really stands out when they go into a zone. It's like no matter how the offense tries to attack, there's just no way to break it. Against teams who rely heavily on slashing to create their offense, they'll often throw out a 2-3 look, and what this does is force everyone on the floor to make really tough decisions. This time you're going to see the Wizards try to attack it by having someone set up on the elbow, and when he catches, it looks like an instant advantage. But as soon as he skips it to the wing, Jaquez is closing out hard. Then when he attacks, Love steps over to the block, and they force a turnover. I think much of their ability to execute zone defenses to near perfection once again comes down to Bam's positioning in the middle. I know I said he's not the same sort of rim deterrent as some other bigs. When it comes to being in the right spot at the right time though, there aren't many better. With that said, they've still shown to be really effective when it's Kevin Love in the middle, who's got great activity and positioning himself. Then when he's tested down low, he'll often elect to draw the charge. As for the wings, sometimes you'll see one of them deny that pass to the middle and force the offense to create elsewhere. On this one, the Sixers try one of those corner handoffs, and it's right back to Miami's switchability and emphasis on shutting off the paint. To me, it's pretty easy to see exactly why this defense continues year after year to translate so well to the playoffs. For one, it's the buy-in. Everyone's active, Everyone's on the same page, so even when they have one or two weak defenders on the floor, as long as the rotations and switches are on point, it's really difficult to create advantages. Then you have the schematic versatility, and by that I mean they can play any type of pick and roll coverage thanks to Bam. They can throw out a bunch of different zones, switch matchups as they please. Essentially, if the offense dictates a change in strategy, the Heat can go to it, and Spoelstra will do exactly that. Another thing I want to quickly bring up is how good they are at defending in transition. This season, they've allowed less than 19 points a game, second in the NBA, on just 1.08 points per possession, good for 5th. I think there are 3 major factors working together here. First is the buy-in. Every extra effort, high motors across the board, so when they find themselves out of position, they'll make some great recoveries. Number 2 is the fact that they don't run a traditional lineup. Bam is maybe the quickest 5 in the league, so when you have him next to a bunch of athletic wings, they just simply aren't going to be beat down the floor much. And lastly, it's the way they operate on offense. As a team, they really don't turn the ball over much at all, which means they're able to get set without having to deal with a bunch of fast breaks. When it all comes together, the versatility in the half court, how they completely take away the paint, the transition defense, we're talking about a unit that really serves as a good matchup for anyone who stands in their way. Just last year, they were the only team to hold Denver under a 119 offensive rating. To get there, it was a conference final series versus the title favorites in Boston, who were held to just 114. Look, I'm not saying you should take out all your money and bet on them getting to the finals again, but as long as they're defending like this, nobody is safe from the Miami Heat. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Heat. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.